in the Midwest. Both the Army, Air Force, and the Navy used the B-24 in a variety of roles, a fact which made it more versatile, if not more respected, than the B-17. Liberators were employed as high and low altitude bombers, night intruders, skip bombers, transport aircraft, and for long-range maritime patrol missions. Few aircraft in American history have been adapted for as many uses as the B-24. Its very versatility made it one of the great designs of World War II. The B-24 first saw action for the Army Air Forces with a secret unit called the Halverson Project, number 63. Nicknamed HALPRO, this small group of 23 liberators and 231 men left Florida in May of 1942 with orders to bomb Tokyo. Led by the loud and abrasive Colonel Harry "Hurry-Up" Halverson, the detachment flew from Florida down to Brazil, crossed the Atlantic, and then passed through the interior of equatorial Africa. Turning north, HALPRO's Free Spirit pilots landed at Khartoum, Sudan, where the British halted them. German raids were hitting other airfields along the chain of strips HALPRO planned to use to get to China, where they had orders to operate from a series of primitive fighter bases in the Zhejiang province.
The original mission, my understanding is, was to go to Khartoum. Then from Khartoum they were going to go to Shenzhen, China. And then they were going to bomb Tokyo, or Japan, from Shenzhen, China. But then Shenzhen was overrun by the Japanese. So that's what killed the Halverson Project. But the original group was to go by way of Egypt over to Shenzhen, China, then from there bomb Japan.
All of a sudden, HALPRO's entire purpose had been rendered moot. They were orphaned in the middle of nowhere with no mission and no orders. Halverson's intrepid little band ended up joining the British Desert Air Force in Egypt. From there, his remaining B-24s began flying tactical support missions for the 8th Army as it battled Rommel around Tobruk.
We didn't have any command over there at all. We didn't have an Air Force command like 9th or 8th or anything like that. We were just a group. And the British were having problems with Rommel. Rommel was knocking at the doors of Cairo, and that's when the British asked for the B-24's support in bombing Rommel's supply lines and his ships bringing supplies in. So we took our orders, we got targets and orders from the British, or at least Kane did, and we were assigned missions.
On one mission, Halverson's B-24s actually attacked an Italian surface task force composed of cruisers and battleships.
Malta was an ideal post out there that could pick up the convoys coming from Italy and Germany. Would have to bypass off the coast of Malta, and when the information on convoys came through, it was passed on to our bomber command or group, and we were told what to look for and where to find them, or anticipate finding them. So we'd go out after the ships in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's not easy to hit a maneuvering ship, because by the time you drop your bomb and that ship goes and changes course to a different direction, your bomb isn't going to hit. But we did get ships. We did damage them or cripple them. And then the British submarines in the area would finish them off if possible.
Then in June of 1942, the USAAF commander Hap Arnold came up with a new and dangerous secret mission for HALPRO. Instead of flying on to join the fight against the Japanese or staying in Egypt where they would continue to fight Rommel, Arnold ordered Colonel Halvorsen to attack Ploesti. Originally, Halpro's pilots were supposed to fly from Egypt, skirt Turkish waters, then turn north to fly up through the Balkans to strike the oil fields, then head back south. As the navigators worked the course out, they discovered that they probably wouldn't have enough fuel to get home. Instead, the American officers who arrived to brief them told the crews to land in Iraq. That shortened the flight to about 2,600 miles, but still the B-24s could not possibly fly that far with the 3,600-pound bomb load they had been ordered to carry.
Hurry-Up Halvorsen was not the kind of guy who was going to risk the lives of his men to satisfy some political decision or political need on the part of the Allies. So just before this mission was flown, he walked in to the briefing room, saw his crews, and looked at them and said, "All right," pointed at a map, said, "This is the most direct route," and he pointed across Turkey. "We're going to use it." And so, oh, and by the way, flying at low altitude, that's not going to happen either. So they went up to their normal bombing altitude. They crossed Turkey illegally. They bombed Ploesti and came back across Turkey illegally. But they did so and got back. The ones that got back had actually enough fuel to get back. There were some that got interned in Turkey and one that ended up in Iraq. But for the most part, that decision probably saved many lives on that mission. Otherwise, had they gone the route that they had been originally ordered to go and at the altitude, they probably would have been shot down to the last plane or run out of gas on the way home.
To the pilot's relief, Halvorsen knew that any other way into Ploesti would guarantee a suicide mission. On June 11, 1942, the mission began. Halpro's raid on Ploesti was the first American raid on the European continent, and it was the first raid on the critical oil fields that would later absorb so many American bombs. 12 B-24s made it over Romania, where one bombed ships in a Black Sea harbor and the others hit the oil refineries around Ploesti, then turned for home. Halpro's first Ploesti mission never received much publicity, and the low-altitude strike a year later, on August 1, 1943, soon eclipsed the single pinprick raid. Halvorsen himself landed in hot water for taking his men over neutral Turkey. He then ended up destroying his career when he began arguing with his British superiors in Egypt.
After that first Ploesti mission, Halvorsen locked horns numerous times with his British superiors, who complained to Washington enough so that he eventually got recalled, and that destroyed his military career. He came home kind of in ignominy and ended up retiring from the service as a colonel and didn't see any further action in World War II. It's kind of a tragic end to a guy who was really loved by his airmen.
Halpro had ceased to exist, but in its short combat career it had proved the value of the B-24. A year later, hundreds of B-24s were operational from the North African desert to East Anglia to the frozen Aleutian Islands through to the jungles of New Guinea. On every front where the Army Air Force saw action during World War II, the B-24 served as a key player in the heavy bomber forces. In the Pacific, the long-range Liberators were used by Kenny's 5th Air Force as both low- and high-level bombers. One B-24 group, the 380th, flew out of Darwin, Australia for much of the war, where they struck repeatedly at the Japanese occupation forces of the Dutch East Indies. The 380th grew experienced at low-altitude night anti-shipping missions, as well as night intruder missions